Good evening. How are you this beautiful Thursday evening? I'm feeling it's probably Thursday this week. My name's Christine, and I shall be taking you through this evening's Google Digital Garage training session, all about how to build engaging presentations. So, where should we start? Well, let me tell you a little bit about me first. So my name's Christine, as I say, and I'm one of the trainers here on Google's free skills training program, the Google Digital Garage. I'm a marketeer by trade, and I've been involved in marketing since before it was even digital. And actually, when I started my career, if you had told me I would spend my life talking to potentially hundreds of people at a time, I would have thought you were crazy, because presentations and doing presentations and having confident presentation skills, just not something that was for me. However, I firmly believe now, having all those years of hindsight, that actually no matter who you are, where you start from, presenting and the confidence to do so isn't something that you're born with. It's definitely something that can be developed. And that's what we're going to take a look at this evening. So won't be doing that on my own. Alongside me this evening, I have our wonderful moderator, Mohammed. Now, Mohammed is also one of our Google Digital Garage coaches. He's also a really experienced presenter himself. So what he's going to be doing, he's going to be in the chat. He's in the chat right now. Hopefully some of you have already said hello to him. If not, pop in there as you do. You can tell you're speaking to our moderator. First of all, he's called Mohammed, and he's got a little blue spanner next to his name that shows that he's the one pretty much in charge. He's going to be in the chat. He will be answering your questions. He's going to be dropping you some useful links, and he'll just be adding his own little take on this evening's proceedings as well. So if you want to chat with Mohammed, really hope you do, then you're going to need to be signed in to your YouTube account. Up on the right-hand side there should be an icon. So if you're not signed in already, sign up or sign in and get yourself all set with YouTube. Bit of housekeeping, any problems with, seeing the webinar, viewing it right now, just give the page a little bit of a refresh. We do have the captions working this evening, so do check over to the CC area to get those closed captions. Any questions as we go through, Mohammed will be answering in the chat there, but what he is also going to do is a couple of times through the evening, we are going to pause and we are going to take questions together. So Mohammed will send me any of those questions that he thinks the whole group would be worth hearing. So what else do you need to know? Oh, this webinar is going to be held live from you till about lunchtime tomorrow. So best suggestion is you watch right through with me now. But there's a lot to get through this evening, so we are going to have to move at quite a quick pace. So my top tip is if we get to a part where you think, aha, this part's the part I need to get to, jot down the time code. Take your notes, jot down the time code as you'll then have time, once we've finished, to review the webinar, which you'll just use by clicking on the link that you used to get here in the first place. So you do know, we are running this Google Digital Garage virtual training as part of our broader offering of courses. So if you want to check out the schedule of upcoming webinar training, just see the information on that. It's in the description below. There's a link through to our website, and that's where you can find out everything else you need to know. All right, so let's jump on in and take a look at how to go about building your presentation. So those of you who've joined us for sessions before will know we tend to break them down into 3 bite-sized pieces for you. We'll start with thinking about how you some different ways that you might approach the situations in which you have to present. All right, so think of some of those situations. Be already thinking, where might you need to present? When do you have to present yourself? When do you have to present your ideas? Give that a think and start letting Mohammed know the situations that you might need to present in. Because then we're going to take a bit of a look at how to actually start. If you're starting a presentation from scratch, where do you even start? So we'll look at some tools for doing that. And then my favorite section of possibly any of the Google Digital Garage webinars is when we're going to talk about some of those presentation skills. So we'll look at ways, as I say, anybody can develop their skills, anybody can get better. So we will be able to, hopefully by the end of tonight, have a couple of pointers as to where you can go. I know I can just see the chat coming through, and it is amazing to have so many people from all over the world this evening. Just for those people who are joining me from the UK, we've got a bit of a special offer for you. So if you are based here in the UK and you are looking to improve your job-ready skill set, okay, then there is a free, flexible online training program, which is to help you earn those in-demand job skills for high-growth, high-demand careers such as in IT support, project management, data analytics, user experience design. There's no relevant experience required. So in the UK, you can access Google Career Certificates via free scholarships through our selected partners. So sign up for that at goo.gle/careercertuk. Now, the career certificates are available in lots of different areas in the world. I just don't know what the particular scholarship situation will be in your area, but give it a search, find out what's going on, because they are really worth investing in yourself to get those job-ready digital skills. All right, so question for you. I want you to have a think and let Mohammed know if you can. I want you to think about you as a consumer of presentations. I want you to think about yourself as when in times in the past where you have experienced presentations. We do this with lots of all marketing. The first thing I would ask you to do is put yourself in the shoes of the customer, so you can see through their eyes. So before we talk about improving your presentation style or your skills, I want you to think about being in the audience, okay? And let Mohammed know any ideas of memorable presentations that you've experienced. So that could be somebody who was the most engaging person you've ever seen. Or maybe it was a topic they were talking about, or maybe there was something that was you felt so inspired by that it's changed your life. Or maybe it was the other way. It was memorable for all the wrong reasons. I remember having a college lecturer who would just stare at the screen behind him as he delivered his lessons. And worse than just staring at the back of the head for the entire session was that his voice was very monotone, and he would talk like this all the way through, and all he would do would read out the slides. And it felt like, well, you could just get a robot to do that, and they would probably deliver it a bit more, keep it a bit more interesting if it were a robot anyway. So have a think. Can you think of a time, and as I say, let Mohammed know if you can, of a fantastic presentation and what made it so fantastic? Or on the flip side, maybe a presentation that hasn't been so fantastic, and what was it about it that made that? As I say, let Mohammed know, and we will take a look at some of those, because what I'm trying to get you to do right now is start to think about almost a list of do's and don'ts for yourself, and we'll crowdsource what makes a great presentation and what makes one that we maybe would want to avoid. Okay, so next question to think about, and I can see we've already got some people saying that, maybe you haven't had to do this yet. So I want you to think about why you might want to present. Why might you be asked to present something? Because presentations generally involve some mix of a speaker giving you some information. Okay, it's its basic form. And a presentation is usually used to either communicate something, to maybe persuade somebody of something, or to instruct somebody, to show them what to do. So the communication, the persuasion might be a job interview. It might be that we present ourselves as the product when we are going for a job interview or a college interview, or we're looking to advance in our careers. Maybe we're instructing somebody, we're showing somebody how to do something. That could be in something you do in your voluntary life. It doesn't just have to be in a work situation. Maybe it's a project you've worked on at college where you have to communicate some things. And we're going to talk about all of the different signals that we use to communicate as we go through. All right. One thing that's come about quite recently with the digital age is this idea that actually we are much, much less likely as human beings in 2022, we are much less likely to actually sit and read information. Possibly due to the likes of social media and the availability of video formats. We like visual. We learn best through visual. We learn best through maybe videos or pictures, as well as getting that auditory input from the listening. And actually, quite a lot of us wouldn't take in information very well if we had to read it all the time. Okay, so presentations allow us to communicate in a much more effective way than writing alone. So what I'm going to do, I asked you about good presentations. I'm going to show you a type of presentation that's become quite popular in recent years. And I want you to have a look at this and maybe let Mohammed know anything that occurs to you. What kind of presentation is it? How effective do you think the speaker is? All right, so I'm going to get this to play. Let's see how it goes.
What you're doing right now at this very moment is killing you. More than cars or the internet, or even that little mobile device we keep talking about, the technology you're using the most almost every day is this, your tush. Nowadays, people are sitting 9.3 hours a day, which is more than we're sleeping at 7.7 hours. Sitting is so incredibly prevalent, we don't even question how much we're doing it. And because everyone else is doing it, it doesn't even occur to us that it's not okay. So instead of going to coffee meetings or fluorescent lit conference room meetings, I ask people to go on a walking meeting to the tune of 20 to 30 miles a week. It's changed my life. You'll be surprised at how fresh air drives fresh thinking, and in the way that you do, you'll bring into your life an entirely new set of ideas. Thank you.
Okay, so that presentation is, as I say, it's a very common form of presentation nowadays, and it was actually a TED Talk. And the idea behind the TED Talk, actually a TED Talk has a really clear idea, okay? So if you could take away one thing from this presentation, what would that be? Maybe let me know, have a think, how effective do you think TED Talks in general and this particular speaker, Nilüfer Merchant, was in particular? Let me know what you think. Let Mohammed know what you think in the chat. Because one thing that we like to think about, rather than when we're trying to communicate, if we go back right back to the beginning, when our ancestors sat around making fire and working out what shape to make a wheel, human beings have communicated through story. And stories are the secret ingredients of presentations. Being able to deliver your messages in a way that are easily understood, that can be feeling very human, even though we have all these wonderful digital tools at our disposal, actually, storytelling is the key ingredient for all of the most successful presentations. So we're going to talk a lot now about structure. How you craft your approach to your presentation is, before you start putting pen to paper or fingers to keyboard, it's all about coming up with the story, or if you like, for a reality TV show type experience, the journey that you want to take that audience on with you. So story structure, beginning, middle, end. That's the most basic kind of story structure, but we don't like the most basic type of anything. Here we are. So I want to think about some of those, taking that a little bit further. And how do you tell a story? All right, so we've got 4 different stories here. So let me start with the first one. The first is what we call an origin story. And as the name suggests, the origin goes back to the beginning. It goes a little like this. I started my marketing business with a laptop in my garage and now have workspaces in 30 countries across the world. It's pretty much the most basic kind of story you can tell, in that it starts at the very beginning and works its way through to now. All right. So think about how you might tell an origin story. These are great for focusing on exactly what happened. All right. What you could then, however, do, maybe to make it a bit more interesting, is change the perspective. Change the place that you're standing. So now, instead of starting at the beginning and working your way forwards, imagine that you're standing, at that beginning and looking out into the future. And that's where the future vision story comes from. So right now, my marketing business is growing, and my goal is to have offices in 30 countries worldwide. Okay, so rather than that's what happened and here we are now, we're like, this is where we are now and look where we're going. All right. And both of those have their places. You could probably say, I guess, that they're opposites of each other. The origin story is telling the story as it has been. The future vision is painting the picture of what's to come. We can go a little bit deeper still. All right. So some of the most engaging stories, and if you think about the TED Talks, if you think about a lot of people that you might follow on YouTube, for example, lots of the most engaging success stories are actually the one where they strip away all the shiny Instagram perfection and get to the heart of what really happened. We call those failure or success. And it goes a bit like this. You actually strip away and lay bare those failures and show how the success came about. My first couple of attempts at starting my business failed, as I didn't have the right target market. I learned from my mistake and now have offices in 30 countries across the world. We're telling the same story, but with a different twist on it each time. Okay. And failure or success are great for inspiring people. They're also really good when you're trying to, show how you got stuck and then came unstuck, and they're really, really inspirational, actually. And our final story type is the realization story. And this is the eureka moment story, if you will. And it goes a bit deeper into the history. And it says, I had been in the finance industry for 15 years when I went to a talk on marketing strategy. And I realized, there it is, we're just saying it out there right now. I realized that I wanted to start my own marketing company and expand into different countries across the world. All right. So all about being stuck and having that moment. And there again can be really inspirational as well. Here you are. This is why we took the decision we took. This is where we went. And this is why we did it. Okay. And actually, if you think back to the TED Talk, it was a realization story. She realized that sitting down was killing her. And so she wanted to get more active. So she started going on walking meetings. So the storytelling aspect really does bring us in and make everything really human. So have a think, kinds of workday presentations you might be asked to make. For instance, if you have a budget report, a finance report, you could put a whole bunch of spreadsheets up on the board and very boringly talk people through every single last number. Or you might use a success and failure story. You might say, okay, well, this is where we thought we were going at the beginning of the year. This is what our budget had planned. And then these things happened along the way. You might mix in a bit of realization there. We realized that our, COVID had happened, or the world had changed, or, the markets had gone crazy, whatever's going on. All of these external factors meant that we had to change what we were doing. All right. So then you can turn what could sound like a bad news story. Oh, well, we didn't hit the numbers we said because we actually changed course and we did these, and this is why we did it. Maybe you've got new people joining your company and you want to bring them into give them a sense of what they've joined and how everything's going to work for them. So you might find an origin story really interesting. You've got new people coming in. You want them to understand how you got to where you are and really understand the significance of what they've joined. Maybe you've got an ideas pitch to do. You want to communicate all your enthusiasm. You want to communicate how the world would look if your idea came to fruition. So that could be a future vision story. It could be a realization. This is the moment that I realized that this idea was going to change the world, and give the story of that. It might be, think about how you might tell a story of you're in a job interview. Why do you want this job? And it might be a realization story. Well, maybe you've changed career. I was doing this and this was how my life was going. And I realized that actually my passion was to work in whatever job you've got going on. So you can use these storytelling techniques in so many different places. So let's go a bit deeper now into that story structure. All right. So first things first, what are you trying to achieve? If I'm going into a job interview, my goal is to get the job. If I'm presenting my budget report, my goal is that the people who sign off the budget and decide whether I still keep my job, maybe, decide that this is a good thing to do. This is the way forward. So before you even start thinking about slides and notes and even the story itself, work out what's the point of what you're doing. What is your goal? What are you trying to achieve? And if you can work out what your goal is, what you want to achieve, then you can make sure that every single thing you do supports that goal. Have a think, flip it on its head. After the presentation, what do you want the participants to do? Okay, that could be the goal. Affecting that change in behavior might be the goal of what you're trying to achieve. So the goal of the TED Talk was to get people to consider going on a walking meeting, taking a different approach. Okay, so the next thing to think about is pulling together the structure of your presentation. And when you're starting, you've got your beginning, your middle, your end, you're telling your story. There are going to be key points that you want people to think. All right, you want them to think something that's going to make them agree with you or be persuaded or, realize that this is the best way of doing something. Okay, so people are attending the presentation in the first place to obtain some information. So how are you going to influence that audience to come around to your way of thinking? If you can find moments in your story to get them to really think about a topic, to really consider the facts that you're explaining, to really understand the insight that you're bringing. And then, so if you work out what you want those moments to be, then you need to think about how to highlight these and really integrate them into your presentation so it works seamlessly and beautifully. Okay, so we've got them thinking something. We want them to agree with us, maybe. We want them to say, yeah, this is a person I would love to give this job to. But we don't just work on hard facts, all right? Because when you're presenting as one human being to another, it's about so much more. So if you can absolutely get somebody to feel something, the full range of human emotions, to feel excited by what you're doing, can you make them feel impressed by who you are? So they absolutely have to have you in their company. You might want them to relax a bit. You might want to use a little bit of humor to get them to relax, to get them to like you, to get them open to take your way of thinking on board. You might want them to empathize what you're saying, so really personalize the narrative. So rather than talk a story about somebody else, tell them about your thoughts, your feelings, your experiences. Can really help to make it more engaging. It can help to make them empathize with what you're doing. If you can build a connection with your audience, it's really going to help make that potentially even dry topic a lot more exciting and invigorating. Face-to-face, you want to make sure you're making eye contact. When we're using an online presentation, I'm making eye contact with you now by looking directly down the camera at you. But maybe as well, I want to call out your name in the chat. Let you know that I know that you're calling from all over the world. Okay? Makes people understand that their contributions are being noted. And from every section or from the whole presentation itself, it's worth understanding that human beings won't remember everything you've said. Okay, so if you try to cram in as many facts as possible, people are only ever going to take a limited number. I've heard numbers bandied around. They'll take away one thing, they'll take away three things, they'll take away 7 from an entire day. So what it's really worth considering is, what do you want them to take away? This presentation tonight's a little bit different because we don't really know what on any given day, who's going to be in our audience, what their skills are going to be, what they're going to want to achieve. We try and in our Google Digital Garage presentations give you lots of things that you could, and then we actually have to rely on you to pick out the bits that you want. But if you're presenting for a really clear goal, think back to that goal. And if they could only take away one thing from your presentation, what would it be? That you're the great person for the job, that this budget was actually a success because you worked so well in our changing times, that your idea is the one they need to take forward and make happen. You know, the TED Talk, it was very clear the presenter wanted to take one thing away, which was the need to be more active in our day-to-day lives. People will forget much of what you say, so make sure you keep referring back to the goal and reinforce that clear idea, and don't tell them lots of things they don't need to know. Now, this isn't a 7-step plan. This is an idea of having structure and flow to your presentation. So if I was sitting down to write a presentation and I was thinking of telling my story, and it's got its beginning, its middle, and its end, I'd actually step that 3-step, the beginning, middle, end, into 4 steps. At the beginning, I want to give the background, all right, to the problem, to the issue, to myself, to whatever it is. Start with a little bit of a nice on-ramp with a bit of background about why you're here, who you are. Okay. Then the middle section, the longest section, should be all about identifying from your audience's point of view what is going to be of use to them, what their problem is. Now, in this case, a problem doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. But for you to be doing a presentation, you are probably going to be presenting a solution to something. Tonight's solution is all about how, improving your presentations. Okay, so the problem is that we don't know where you're starting from, but lots of people feel unsure about how to start with presentations. So our solution is, we're going to help you with lots of different skills. And we're spending the majority of our evening tonight doing that. And at the end, we'll have our end. The end will be the conclusion. Okay, so we will wrap up everything we've said. We'll think back to that goal, and we'll make sure that we've pulled out those really clear pieces that are going to help you to get whatever it is that you need from. All right. So how do you actually go about doing that? You've got your beginning, your middle, your end. Well, the first thing, and probably the part that will take up most of the time, is actually the research, right? So don't just leap in creating slides. Think about, and I would always block this out with a pen and paper, do some research, pull in my facts, get my statistics together that are going to really reinforce what I've got to say. Then I'll plan it out on paper. And it's only once I've done a load of research, crafted it, decided what my story is going to be, that I'll actually sit down and do the design. Okay. So think about how you might pull yours together. Different pieces, you might come up with a great quote when you're doing your research. And then in the plan, you're going to work out where that quote's going to come. You might get some great statistics that are really going to get people thinking. Where are you going to place those? Remembering that we're going to try and make people think something, and we're going to try and find some areas that they're going to be able to feel. A little bit later, we'll be talking about how to pace your delivery and, some of the more technical aspects. So really be thinking about using different types of content. Just like in marketing, we're using content here, and really be thinking about all the great elements you want to pull together when you pull that presentation in. So here's a bit of a thing. I've got some homework for you. All right. You don't become a good storyteller overnight. There again, it's something that can be practiced, can be improved upon. So I want you to set aside some time over the next day or so and practice tell somebody a story about something. If you can make it something that inspires you, if it could be the story of, why you joined me this evening to learn about presenting. If you can't think of anything, then use the story of a journey you take often. Okay, set a timer for 3 minutes and tell your story. If you've got nobody at home to tell the story to, set a timer and record a few minutes of a story. Then leave it a little while and watch it back. And when you're done, think about the kind of story you told. Did you naturally put those facts into an origin, a future vision, a success or failure, or a realization story? And once you've worked that out, tell the story again. Tell the same story, but change the viewpoint. If you used an origin, try a success or failure. If you did a future vision, maybe try a realization. Try and play with a simple story to get the hang of some of these techniques. All right, so I'm going to pause here for questions. I can see that we've got tons and tons and tons of comments coming in. So it's great to have you all with us. Samuel Leon remembers a teacher at university that would bring all types of objects to presentations to make them more interactive. What a fantastic idea. We're going to be talking actually as we go through all about bringing things to life, making them more interesting. So that's a fantastic way to do that if you get that chance. All right, then. So I can see there's no questions that Mohammed hasn't been able to answer as yet, which is kind of what happens when you work with Mohammed. So we're going to move swiftly on to the actual building of the presentations. Okay. So we're thinking here, we've done our research, we've structured our thoughts, we know what the story we have to tell is. Let's think of some tools that we can use to support us. And actually, that's really important. The tools should ever only be used to support what you have to say. All right. First thing to do is to think about your audience. Who are you presenting to? How can you make it as easy as possible for them to understand what you want them to know? The most important people are the people doing the listening. So lots of times we want to make sure we're flipping everything around to make sure that it's going to be in the right format for those people. The message that I'm trying to convey, how are they going to take to this? How are they going to understand it as easily as possible? Do they all need the same sort of information? And coming into tools and technologies, how are you going to present it? Lots of presentations now, you might be delivering it virtually like we are. If you're delivering it virtually, there's things that you need to consider. Access, who can get on. I love the way we present on YouTube because it's super, super easy for our participants to just click on a link and come to YouTube. There's quite a lot of technical work goes behind the scenes to bring you this session this evening. So, there are lots of factors to take into consideration when you're choosing what tools, what technologies. If you're going to present face-to-face, what will the room look like? How many people are going to be in the room? Are you going to need a projector? Do you need a laptop? Will there be technology there? Do you have the right wire and cable to connect in? All of these things are things to really think about as you start pulling the presentation together, rather than having to try and work out and refit things later on. Big question. So when people talk about having a presentation, we often think about slides, the old projected onto a wall, or slides like I have this evening alongside me. I love a slide because it reminds me what to say. However, they're not mandatory. You might choose, and I've seen some fantastic presentations where slides haven't been used. If you think about the TED Talks don't tend to use slides in the way we would imagine them, but they do sometimes use some other things. So different ways you might go about it. You might decide that you want to make it quite an interactive presentation. So something like Mural is one of the tools you can use to have people collaborating on, electronically, digitally, as you work. All right. So, or you might decide rather than traditional slides, you want some beautiful images, some memes, some words running behind you. You might use a graphic design package like Canva to pull those together. You might want to get some interactivity going on. And you can do this via both in a face-to-face or even on a webinar like this by asking questions, running polls. A tool like Slido might really help you there. And the great thing about a tool like Slido is that you get to keep that feedback. Rather than just asking for a show of hands, at the end, you'd be able to look back and see how many said, yes, they like this, or, oh, no, they preferred something different. Or if you build a word cloud together, you'll be able to keep that for all time. Or as I say, you might decide you don't want or need anything distracting from what's actually going on. Even if you choose whatever technology you choose to use, bear in mind that it might all go wrong. We've had a couple of instances where, the webinar slides have failed. What would we do then? Okay, so make sure you've got a backup plan in mind and you've given it a practice. If you can get into the room, then give that a practice. If not, have a really clear idea of exactly what you are going to need for that day and what your backup would be. I once had to do a presentation, was asked for a job interview to do a presentation, but I wasn't allowed to use slides. Now, I need something to remind me what to say in what order. And I actually took it a little bit differently. I made some Post-it notes and I had one word on each Post-it. And as I said the word from the Post-it, I stuck it on the wall behind me and made a big mind map that I could then talk through. So it wasn't a presentation, but I did use some visual aids to help me to bring what I was saying to life. So once you've had a look, depending on what you do, but many presentations, not by means all, but including online sessions like ours today, require you to build a presentation using some computer software. All right. If you've got a computer, if you've got a tablet, even if you've only got a mobile phone, you can build presentations and even run them. Okay. So different tools out there available. Some of them you might have heard of. PowerPoint was the original, and we've all heard of it. It's been so well used that it's so well known that we've probably heard of the words death by PowerPoint, which is a stage of having too many slides, something we definitely want to avoid. It's really packed with features. There's a cost to using Microsoft PowerPoint if you have the full version, but they have recently made a cut down version with fewer features, but probably definitely enough to get you started. And that's available online for free. You might want to think about Prezi. If you've got lots of animations and you want to spend a bit of time making it look really fancy, then Prezi is a tool that lots of people have given a go. It does add those animations, but it isn't free. So there is a cost to doing it, which will definitely need to be factored in. If you use Apple, then you may already be familiar with Keynote, which is the Apple presentation software that's native to the iOS environment. Or then we have Google. So Google have a free online tool called Google Slides. It's what our presentation this evening is built in. It's fantastic for collaboration because it allows lots of different people, as many people are in your team, it allows different people who have signed in access to work at the same time. All of the tools, like anything, have their upsides and downsides. They've all got differences, but they all look quite similar when you're creating a new presentation. So we're going to take a look at how to get started, and for probably obvious reasons, we'll take a little bit of a look at Google Slides. So as I've said, Google Slides is great for working with other people. It's fantastic because if you're like me and has ever lost an entire day's work because you forgot to hit save, Google Slides backs everything up to the cloud all the time. All right, so you can go back and look at the version that you used last Wednesday and you think, actually, that's the version I'd rather have. You can roll back the versions. You can also access it from anywhere in the world that you have an internet-enabled device and an internet connection. And it can also be converted into different formats. So you can convert it to a PowerPoint, or you can convert it to, say, a PDF, which allows you to export it. And you can also use Google Slides to edit other software, such as PowerPoint slides that have been created, can be updated and amended within Google Slides. Whichever tool you're going to use, you normally good way to start is by choosing how it's going to look, the look and feel of it, all right? Customize how it's going to look. So to do this, you're going to look at the theme of it. Lots of basic templates that are going to allow you some control over, you know, how the bullet points look, what the font is, and you're choosing here from a preset list of pre-designed themes. It's about consistency. It's also about not spending ages crafting every little fine detail of the slides. It means you can choose a theme. I always choose it at the beginning, and then you can run through and pull your presentation together without having to worry too much about going back at the end and changing things. All right. So if you want to have a consistent look to all the slides, then a theme is the first thing you're going to want to do. And the formatting for those is all created by the theme that's there. You might want to take that a little bit step further. It's still easy enough to use, but you might decide to use a custom theme. So if you create a custom theme, you edit the master theme and you add your own elements. That might be choosing your own color scheme to fit your brand. It might be adding your logos to make sure they're consistently through. And the great thing there, again, you can change the font, you can change the styles. If you've got brand guidelines, you can make sure that it fits in with the brand guidelines you have for your social media, for example. So it's got a really consistent look and feel to do it. But just because you can make it look really fancy doesn't mean that you should. You don't want to bombard people with too much visual information, which could end up distracting from the message that you've got to say. And if you've ever used pretty much any kind of word processing software or any kind of packages like that, you're probably already quite familiar with the features and the functionality that's going to be available. But along the top of our screen, you'll find your navigation bar. If we just work from left to right, at the top you have the title. It currently says Untitled Presentation. The amazing thing is, as you overtype where it says Untitled Presentation with the name of your presentation, it's going to save that presentation as your name in your file. Okay. Then you've got, you know, you can use plus button there to add a slide in. You can use the forward and back arrow to undo or redo changes. Then you've got selecting an image. You've got adding a text box, adding a picture, lines, shapes, all of those elements that you would expect to make it really, to bring those slides to life. And then the final chunk where it says background layout theme, that's, you know, changing those elements of the look and feel of the page. And you've also got transition. A transition is what happens when you click and one slide disappears and the next one appears. Some people use a transition to make bullet points come in one by one. There again, lots you could do there. Make sure that anything you do doesn't overwhelm the senses. Sometimes too many transitions with things flying in from here, there, and everywhere can make your watchers feel a little bit seasick. And then, just as I did right over there on the right-hand side, when you're ready, you click Present, you make sure your slides fit the screen, and off you go. Now, a few things to think about. First up is, what is your title of your presentation going to be? A title is what hooks us in. If you think back to the goal of your presentation, how are you going to use just a few words to go on that first page to really make people understand what they're going to get from your session and want to come and see it? Because the title of the presentation might be listed on an online directory, like you getting here today. It was listed on a website. You decided that sounded interesting. It might be in the conference program of somebody who's going to look at lots of different things. The title could be, you know, about you and what they're going to learn about why you would be fantastic for this job. All right. Get them hooked in. Tell them what you're going to tell them. And it's an important part of your opening, actually. Now to just a few quick guidelines. Too much text on a slide can be overwhelming. You might be, especially if you're nervous, you might be tempted to just read out the slide. that nobody wants to see that. Or your audience might be reading it rather than paying attention to you. Not everybody finds big chunks of text easy to understand. You might not be presenting, your text might not be in their native tongue. There might be other issues, dyslexia or what have you going on. So rather than concentrating on words on a screen, you want people to be concentrating on you. If your goal is to be understood, make it as easy as possible for everyone, which tends to be simple language. Bullet points are great, simple, easy to digest, fewer words, the better. Okay. So as well as that, think about the number of slides. There's no magic number of slides in a presentation. All depends on the kind of content you're delivering, but try not to have more than one presentation slide per minute. Maybe even one slide per 2 minutes, So if I was doing a 15-minute presentation, having 15 slides in it will be right on the border of too many. Okay. Make sure, as we've said already about text, if you're using bullet points, which are fantastic, keep them concise. You use the bullet points to remind you what to say and to reinforce for those people who like a visual. Don't use them as a crutch to make sure that you say every single thing. Make sure your slides can be read. Black text on a white background is the most easily readable for accessibility purposes for most people. Okay. Use a clear font. Can it be read from the back of the room? If you get too ornate a script, then that's really going to be difficult for a lot of people to read. Vary your content. We talk about statistics and quotes and pictures and bullet points. Mix these things up. A presentation that just looks the same slide after slide after slide is going to put people off. And actually, you can change your pace too. Sometimes you'll put, and I've done this evening, sometimes I've put one slide up and spoken about it for 5 minutes. At other times, it will be one slide after the other, after the other, after the other, and keep those points moving quite quickly. By doing that, by varying that pace, you're actually making changes that are going to keep your audience guessing, going to keep them engaged, going to keep them awake, because they don't know what's getting next. If you fall into too much of a steady, ploddy rhythm, then that could be something that is actually going to count against you. And a few extra things for if your presentation is going to be online. Make sure, are you going to need to share a screen? Like I've done this evening, I'm sharing my screen so you can see what I'm looking at. Make sure you know how to do that. Do you want the participants to be able to see their faces? If I'm having a small meeting with maybe 5, 10, 15 people, I would much rather see faces than a blank screen. How possible is that? How much can you control, what's going on there? We normally would have if we're asking for live audience participation, can you get somebody to be your moderator to help you with that? Because it's really difficult to read all your comments coming through and present and know what's coming next. Make sure you know how to use the technology. You've done a few dry runs, you've sent it live, you've watched it back, you've learnt your lessons before you get in front of that live audience. And make sure you've got an eye to any costs that you might incur. Nobody wants to be attending a webinar that's meant to be an hour long that cuts off after 45 minutes because you only have the free version of the particular software being used. All right, I'm going to just check in with Mohammed. I can see no questions coming in as yet that he needs me to jump in on, so that's great. Got one more time for questions coming up in about 10 minutes' time, so do get any last-minute questions in that you can. So let's jump on in and think about presentation techniques, presentation skills. I was somebody who did not think I was any good at presenting. I did not enjoy presenting. The thought of speaking to 500 people in a conference room would have made me ring in sick. Okay? These are things that can be overcome. All right. Now I would think nothing of speaking to lots of lovely people every single day of the week. So it really is worth persevering. It is worth getting over these getting over your own fears, because presenting is as much about presenting yourself, and we present ourselves every single day of our lives. We walk into a room full of you people, shake hands and say hello. We are presenting ourselves. So think about what kind of presenter you want to be. All right. Think about those best and worst presentations. The common theme between a best presentation or a worst presentation is the person doing the delivery. That boring lecturer was because the voice was one tone. They didn't make eye contact. They didn't bring people in and bring those presentations to life. And as I say, I don't believe that being a good, confident speaker is anything to do with having a natural gift. I thoroughly believe presenting is a skill. We all start from different places, but you can make yours better. First thing to do is think about your audience. How many people are you presenting to? If I'm presenting to a job panel, maybe 1, 2, or 3 people who are going to decide whether I'm getting the job, I present very differently to if I've got a room full of people at the Albert Hall, where everything would have to be bigger, more over the top. Maybe I'm presenting online. Online, I could have an audience of thousands. But actually, it should feel quite intimate, because really, it's just me and you here. You know, it's just me. I'm sitting in my house. You're sitting in yours. We're just going to have a conversation. It can be quite relaxed, quite intimate, yet still feel very powerful. So think about who you're presenting to. If you are somebody who gets worried about big crowds, try and turn those big crowds, they are just a collection of individuals. All right. So have a conversation with one individual in the audience. This is my top tip, I guess. If I'm focusing on one person over here in a big audience, and I'm focusing on this person here because this person over here smiled at me as I walked in, or they're smiling at me. Something I said made them smile, made them giggle, made them nod. They've somehow interacted. So I talk at this person, not forever. That would be weird. But I give them a few seconds when I talk to this person. When I'm talking to this person over here, all of those people around them get drawn in. They feel engaged because they can't tell when I'm talking about this person or this person or this person. So they feel engaged. I'm talking to one person, I feel more confident. They're getting a great idea that I'm talking directly at them. So they start to relax. Before it gets weird, I'm going to move to somebody who's sat over here. I'm now going to talk at this person for a few seconds. Hold somebody else's eye contact. That person who's made eye contact smiles at me. I smile back. I start to feel relaxed. They start to feel relaxed. They nod along. They agree with something I've said, or, you know, they interact in some way. I then move across here and down here. And then next I'm looking right down at you. So by moving my gaze and my focus, I'm having a series of one-to-one conversations, and I can handle one-to-one. But actually, as I move around, everybody starts to be drawn in and feel like they're part of it. Okay. Obviously, if you're delivering directly online, it's just me and you here. I'm talking to you directly because this is a one-to-one session, really. Things to think about: audience participation. I love getting audience interaction. We ask for it all the time. It makes it a lot easier. Makes it more personable, makes it more interesting and fun for both of us. If you've got a large group, it can be quite difficult to get participation. But things you can do: ask for a quick show of hands. And when you ask for a show of hands, show people what them to do. As you put your hand up, people go, aha, I want them to put my hand up. I'm going to put my hand up if I agree with them. All right. If you've got a smaller group, maybe a medium-sized group, you could ask a question directly to that individual to get some feedback. You might have a microphone that you pass around. You might split people down. You might have a section in your presentation where you get them to tell you things. Set them to a task, get them to present back to you. So asking audiences questions is a great thing to do. Don't just try and talk at people non-stop. It's why we pause for questions, because in a virtual environment, it's a little bit harder to manufacture. Making sure we're listening, we're acknowledging. If I've asked for a question and I get an answer, I'm going to try and build that into my follow-up. All right. Now, one thing to think about is not overloading. Do you remember I told you right towards the beginning that people aren't going to remember much of what you say? All right. So short presentations, especially in this kind of social media age, really show consideration to your audience. It shows you value their time, and it also helps you to get those points across quickly. A bit like if you were writing for social media, we ditch most of the extra words and just focus on the real good stuff you need to know. So tailor the content to the value that the people in the room want to get from it. Focus on a couple of things to say for each slide. If you get nervous, you'll worry about your mind going blank. But rather than trying to memorize an entire script, use your slides to remind you what to say. And remember 1, 2, or maybe maximum 3 things to say for each slide. By the time you've gone into the 1, remembered the 1, the 2 will happen, the 3 will come out naturally. Okay, so try and have little break points in it that's going to help you. Another thing that's going to really help you is to pause. Now, pauses are really interesting. We're so scared of empty space when we speak that lots of us, rather than stopping talking, will fill an empty space when we're trying to think with an or an or a And all of those funny little noises, they fill the space, but they actually make us sound less knowledgeable than we are because our brains are rushing to catch up. If you take a pause rather than an the pause does a few things. One, it allows your own brain to catch up. The oxygen goes into and comes out into your brain and comes out of your mouth as words. The pause also gives your audience time to catch up. If I talk at you nonstop and it's all coming at you really thick and fast, then that's actually really difficult to understand. I take a pause. The pause says, right, we're done with that portion. We're moving into this section. And that pause there helps you to digest what's going on. Don't be afraid of silence. Listen to yourself talk and practice pacing and measuring and having those pauses. Your voice is an incredibly powerful weapon. And think about how you're going to adapt it. You speak differently to one person, to an audience on the internet, than you do to a room full of people. Okay, the power of it comes. Think about when you're adapting your voice, think about the volume. Sometimes the most effective thing to do is to take the volume down. If you take the volume down, do you see what I did? My body leaned in. Maybe yours did too. Definitely would if we were in a room together. I highlight something important. Rather than shouting about it, I'm going to take the volume down. I'm going to have my own style. Don't try and copy somebody else. Try and bring as much as yourself to your presentation as possible. And if you're worried that people won't like you, well, that's probably for the best. Because if you're going for that job interview and you try to be somebody else, they're going to want the person they met in the interview. If you make sure that they meet you, then it's you they're going to like, it's you they're going to want to be there. So be authentic, be genuine. Think about the tone of your voice, making sure that you're keeping it interesting. You go up and down and you get excited and you take things slowly back. And vary the pace. Use those pauses, use those breaks. Bring people on that journey with you, okay? I use my hands all the time when I speak because that's who I am. But think what your body language is communicating, your gestures, your stance, your facial expressions. Really important. We take in more with our eyes about who this speaker is than we do with our ears, okay? If you get time, try and do this with a mirror, with a friend. Make a happy face. Take a photo of yourself in a happy face. Then take a photo of yourself in your sad face. When you do the faces, watch what happens to your body. Happy and sad, opposite emotions. Happy is open. And my eyebrows are up and my eyes are open and my mouth's open. I'm smiling, but my body is open. Do the same with nervous and confident. With nervous, I duck my eyes. My shoulders come up. I close my body. If I'm confident, my body opens up. I open my eyes, I smile. Happy looks a lot like confident, which also looks a lot like honest. Untrustworthy, sad, nervous, all of these are kind of restricting emotions. Our chin goes down, our eyes come down, our body, we physically make ourselves smaller. So those positive emotions, we have an open body. With our negative ones, those more less desirable ones, we have that really closed body, closed eyes, closed thing. The great thing is you can fake it till you make it. So try adopting a power pose, form a positive, confident body position. Do it now. Jump up from wherever you are and make a power pose. Okay, see how it makes your body feel. Scientifically, power poses work because testosterone levels go up, which makes you more confident. Cortisol level goes down, which makes you feel stronger, more confident. The oxygen, when you start moving your muscles, your heart starts pumping a bit faster. The oxygen comes into your mouth so it can go to your heart, so it can be fed up to your brain and your muscles. All of a sudden, you're working on oxygenated blood, which makes a lot more sense when the words come out of your mouth. And you can adopt a power pose for a couple of minutes. If I'm doing a big presentation, I'll head to the ladies, adopt my power pose for a couple of minutes and feel the difference it has in my body. I then go out, I make my confident smiley face, and I'm ready to rock the world. So be mindful of how much you move, be mindful of how you stand, but really make sure you're connecting in a genuine way, in the way that is natural to you. Don't do a Christine impression. If you don't move your hands when you talk, you don't have to do that. It's all about being yourself because everybody else is already taken. So final homework activity, I guess, is to, when you're setting some time aside, record yourself delivering that story, practice it. Watch yourself back in slow-mo, watch yourself back without looking and just listen to what's said. Pick up a couple of pointers. Do you say too much? Next time you practice it, try not to say that. See what happens. Don't fidget. I used to have a watch and fidget my watch, so I don't wear a watch when I present anymore. Okay, brilliant. So remember to adapt to your audience, think about your voice, think about your body language, and absolutely practice that performance. I know we've had a ton of questions come rocketing in towards the end. I'm really sorry, we have just run over time. Couple of things. So presentation of financial data, theme-wise, doesn't matter. Make something lovely and make something that is quite neutral. And if I was doing either kind of financial data or sales presentation, think about the visuals. I love a graph and a pie chart and a statistic. Try and mix it up with some different content is going to be the best thing for you. Right. So what I want you to do now, make me a promise. Pop into the chat and let Mohammed know what you are going to do next as a direct result of joining me this evening. Is it going to be record yourself and watch it back? Are you going to try and take the ums and the ers with a bit of a pause? Pause more often. Let me know. Pop them in that. If you're based here in the UK and you want help to improve your career prospects, then do check out the Google Career Certificate. They're available for job seekers based here in the UK. So please do make use of that free resource at goo.gle/career cert UK. Otherwise, and I'm so sorry for bobbing over time a little bit, you can tell I'm super passionate about this topic. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your interaction. Got to wrap up here now, but I hope it's been useful to you. If you want to get more training from Google Digital Garage, then head over to our website, which is linked at the bottom, where you can find webinars, you can find our training courses, you can even find our certified course if you want to. Other than that, thanks to Mohammed for being fantastic. We both look forward to welcoming you again to another Google Digital Garage training session sometime soon. Have a great evening.